Sure. I'm Herman Farrell. I'm a professor of theater here in the Department of Theater and Dance at the College of Fine Arts at the University of Kentucky. And I teach mostly playwriting, but I've also taught dramatic literature courses as well as the theater history classes and play analysis.
And my name is Isaiah Page. I'm a recent alum of the department with a BA in Theater and Arts Administration. Herman was my World Theater 1 and 2 and play analysis professor.
Well, let me, if I may, I'll just jump in and ask you a question, Isaiah. Just when you came to UK and became a theater major, what were your one first was like, what was your experience before you got into theater in our department? And then what were your like expectations of what the theater program would be like? How many of those expectations were fulfilled and how many of them were just like, you did things that you didn't expect to do, good or bad? But I'd love to hear about
So,
all that.
yeah, so when I first came to college for a degree in theater, I expected everyone here to be actors. I didn't expect more behind in like tech designers and directors and playwrights and different focuses. And so I came here expecting everyone to audition for the same parts and only care about uh, just the acting part of theater. But instead, when I got to the department, there was a lot more education about becoming a more well-rounded performer and learning more. I remember it was my sophomore year. You said something along the lines of, if you, in order to really love your craft, you have to learn about it. And so it really like resonated with me when I learned like more about doing behind the scenes, whether it's lighting or stage or scenic design, and then learning about what more of the technique of theater rather than just acting. And so it really exceeded my expectations with wanting to learn more about theater. And then it really rose above what I thought everyone was just going to be one level of just actors. So speaking of things that we do in the department, I wanted to know like what's one of your favorite things we do throughout the year, because I know we have our musical, we have studio season, we have the playwriting finals and directing finals, we have improv shows. There's so many things that the department does now. Like we have dance final showcases, and I want to know some things that you really like and some things that you are starting to like become more aware of and learn about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the work that I do, I'll mention obviously the fruition of the work, which is the playwriting projects. But in terms of just seeing theater, I love watching what happens in studio season as someone who helped develop the studio season over many years and kind of
Mm.
play and a lot of the work that comes out of there is really sort of in depth and really sort of connected to the field in terms of what's going on out there. And so I'm always fascinated by when I'm sitting in studio season to see what these students have done on their own together and how they put on a show and make it all happen.
Yeah, like you said earlier, the department, you guys do a really good job of challenging us to grow, because I've seen people who, I've never heard anyone regret taking a class in the department. Like, I've never heard someone say they regret taking a class that's outside of their focus, because at first it comes off as challenging and then there's the gripes and complaints about it. But then as the semester goes by, you always notice that the gears start turning and they become more interested. Like, well, I've learned this really cool thing in class, or I've heard this. And then you see by the end of the semester, they're like, well, I want to take the advanced level. And that's come from me because I never thought I'd like sewing or costume construction. And I was like, well, I want to do the next class. And then the same with being in the scene shop as opposed to acting. And then trying new things like improv. The department's like, well, here's a challenge. See if you can do it. See if you like it. And then it just helps us grow at the end. Yeah, I think being a stage manager is one of the best things that I got to do in the department, because I knew as a person I was not the most organized. And so I became a stage manager to challenge myself. I said, well, I know I have to be organized to do this. So I began creating documents, creating files, creating binders. And I was like, this is how I'm going to start becoming more organized. And then starting with studio, I said, I'm doing this for a small show. And then I can become slightly more organized before the dance concert, where I was in contact with all the faculty and staff and the directors, the choreographers, the dancers. And so going from a cast of I'd say 7 or 8 people that were constantly in an email chat that they were getting from me as a stage manager went to 30 to 45 people during the dance concert. And out of that, I've learned to grow. I was like, well, I know what patience it takes and how the hours I got to put in to become a stage manager. And so it's helped me develop more as a person, because now I'm honestly a lot more organized than I was when I started to be a stage manager. And that was one of my goals, to go in, because I knew I wasn't going to be the perfect stage manager or the most organized person in the world, but I know it was like something that I could work on.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say this. I was an assistant stage manager in my day. I've been a director. I've been a playwright. I've been an actor. I never, ever wanted to be a stage manager. And the reason why is that ultimate responsibility hangs on you. And that's just, to me, it was always the scariest thing. And then, and you seem to have this demeanor of being sort of real sort of cool about stuff when let's just say the stuff hits the fan. And every stage manager you ever meet, when that is happening, when everything's going wrong, is always just like, okay, and we're going to need lights and we're going to need sound.
Yeah.
They just like keep a steady head and keep going. And I know I can never do that. I'm always willing to pull my hair out, as you can see.
That's exactly true, that the stage manager has to keep a level-headed and stay calm. And there was one rehearsal where I was a stage manager for Jaime Delgado's studio season show, and I had overslept. And I was freaking out. I was panicking. I was like, darn, this is on me. I messed up. But then as soon as I stepped in the room, Jaime, the director, he was like, it's okay. We're going to make up for lost time. We can do this. We're going to work through it. And his energy to just stay calm and help me through was just such a great moment to see student to student, like how we can help each other grow. And since that moment, I was like, well, anything that occurs, any time stuff hits the fan, I can breathe and then control myself. And then Jaime was my ASM for the dance concert. And so I was never at a worry with him or my other stage manager, ASM backstage. I was like, well, I know I can rely on them. And it was a very calm and cool process.
Yeah. Well, this kind of touches on parts of I would say really more than any other art form, theater and theater study and practice, that I think prepares all of us to be better citizens and better people going out there in the world, and leaders and all of that sort of stuff. And I went from being a theater major, I went to law school, I practiced law for a while, and I just found that there were things that people were saying to me like, oh, you're really good at that, and you're really good at that, and you're really good at that. Some of those things just came to me not through any class I took, but in everything I was doing in the theater. They call them soft skills. Mm-hmm. And I hate that term, because I think they're hard skills, and I think they're very powerful skills. And, I think that's one cool thing about being a theater major, no matter where you end up going. I mean, we have in the dance program, there's a lot of folks who've gone on to being doctors. Here in the theater program, I've now seen 5 of students who've come through my courses that I've written recommendations for them, go on to law school, and then still do theater, but do a little bit of both. Those skills really end up helping in all careers, I find. Have you already seen that already in any job that maybe even isn't even theater related, where you're like, oh, I'm good at this because I was a major?
Yeah, like some jobs where I'm forced to like multitask, or they're like, you might need to write this down, because I've worked serving, and they're like, you might need to write down these orders. I was like, no, if I repeat something back in my head 3 times, I can pretty much get it.
That's right.
And I was like, yeah, do a lot of theater. And so that's really helped out in just one little way. And just always, no matter where I go, I've learned that because of theater, you always got to be a hard worker. You can't just do the bare minimum amount of work and expect to be great. And so I take that with me wherever I go. I'm like always giving my best effort, or if I'm going to put my time into something, I might as well put all my energy into it. And so that's carried with me from theater to like real life.
And even the interpersonal stuff, like, one of the things that had bothered me about your generation, and even my daughter's generation, and the generations before that, is that you growing up in this world of this, and oh yeah, hey, how you doing, and there's very little eye-to-eye stuff, and in theater you do that all the time, right? You're in an acting class, your professor's going to say, look at each other, pick up on each other's vibes, respond to each other. Just that kind of skill that you're learning in a theater class is really helpful when you get out there in the real world, because those kind of interpersonal things of making eye contact and being sort of engaged with somebody is really, I've always found to be really helpful.
Yeah, I find that it's harder for people who don't have to do this to make eye contact walking down the street or just have a simple conversation without picking up your phone. It was hard for me to do it first. And then as time passed by, as I became to enjoy the more interpersonal moments around the people, because the department's so, I don't want to say small, but close. We're also like, that we enjoy just hanging around at the couches or seeing each other before, after class, and just having conversation. And it's never like we talk to someone because we feel like we have to, but it's just casual conversation with good friends. And whether that be our peers or people we don't know who are just sitting around the couches, or even professors. One thing I'd always like to brag about the department is that the faculty and staff are really close to the students. So they don't just see us as students. They know our names, they know our weaknesses, they know our strengths. And it's like, no professor is going to see a student crying and just continue walking by. They're going to say, I know this student. And he's like, hey, do you want to talk? And I've witnessed that personally, like professors pull in students to talk about things that usually on campuses you wouldn't see. It's one of the things I always brag about the department, is that how close people are, not just sharing the same space.
Yeah. I mean, it just has a lot to do with the art form itself in theater and dance and performance. What we do as artists is we have to be observant, not just observant, but we also have to be engaged emotionally. We have to feel what's happening in the room, as it were. We have to get a sense of the temperature, as they say, of a student or a colleague or what have you. Those sorts of things are really at the core of what we do as artists, which is to connect with each other on an emotional level. Because again, you've heard me talk about this in my theater classes, in the theory classes and the history classes, is that there's always that great moment in a theatrical experience when you as performer on stage and the audience out there are all one. That all of a sudden, and I always say I never can describe it, it's like in the ether, there's just some feeling of connection between you as a human being and these group of people that are collective now, an audience, as human beings all together. And it goes back to Africa and Egypt. It makes its way to the Greeks, to Japan, to all across the world in terms of the theatrical history of folks being together in rooms and making magic happen. It's really, I don't know, just the reason why we do this. And the one thing I just end with this thought is, having gone from, undergraduate theater to law school back to a graduate degree in theater, it was such an interesting contrast, because when you go to law school, they're all about no personal stuff. Don't get emotional. Remove your emotions from this. Argue the case. Just get the facts out. Don't get emotional. Any of that kind of stuff. You're just supposed to literally wipe away your inner feelings about a moment that you're dealing with. And that's fair, and that's the process, and doctors may even be told that they have to do that, when they're in surgery or they're dealing with something like that. So the moment I went from my law school back into the theater world at Columbia, and the first couple of weeks of my graduate training was a professor just running around looking at us going, you're hiding, you're not telling the truth. You got to tell us, and we'd get emotional and cry and express ourselves. And he was like, good. Whereas when I was in law school, it was bad. So it's kind of, that's what the cool thing is about studying the arts, is spending time tapping. I mean, we're not all emoting and irrational in those moments, but we are, feeling something, expressing it, allowing ourselves. You probably saw me get choked up a couple times in classes when we're covering some subject or what have you, or talking about somebody I knew who died. And, again, in law school, if I were a law professor, I'd be trying to not do that. But then as an arts professor, I'm like, these students need to know that we're human here and we can cry. And we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.